This is
Got
Leisha
it.
Jones of the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast, and I'm really, really excited to introduce to our global community today somebody who had the absolute pleasure getting to know me, I think, on his podcast, actually.
I did.
That you might have had an email from him at some point in the past, because he is an absolute formidable force when it comes to supporting and getting people started up in their own recruitment business. This is Max Jones, and he is the director of Isotope Capital, and he's joining us today to share some insights for you all. Welcome to you today, Max. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, and I did have the fortunate pleasure of sitting down with yourself. I've known you for a very long time through LinkedIn, so really being able to get you on our show, so to speak, was great, and obviously happy to return the favour. Yeah. No,
yeah, no, absolutely. And it was a real pleasure. And I hope that maybe in the comments when we share this on LinkedIn, we can get that episode out there, because it was a really enjoyable episode. And to sit on the other side of the desk is always a very rare occasion for me. But I think
I was about to say, yeah.
But I think it's really, for me, the reason I wanted to get you on the show, and actually, as we record this towards the end of 2022, this is obviously going out in the new year, 2023. I know for a fact that our audience, which is global, based across the world, is split between leaders and recruiters. There will be, even if it's one person thinking about setting up on their own. And so who better to ask than you, Max? But people might not yet be familiar with your business. So give us an intro into what Isotope Capital actually do and what you do.
Yeah, no, of course. So Isotope are a startup incubation company that essentially identify exceptionally capable recruiters across a variety of sectors who are looking to start up on their own and offer this launch and support platform to help them do it. It's a very kind of like practical steps in the logistics to help them do that, but also it's a partnership model as well. So it's not a transactional thing for us. It's really you're taking these guys from literally day one to then, years 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and beyond, in terms of helping them do really whatever it is they're looking to do in their own businesses by offering the support around then the key pillars that I know you and I are going to touch upon, whether it's the accounts and back office side of things, the legal compliance, the creative, the tools, whatever it might be to help these guys do it. So, we've been fortunate to do this for a long time. I've been doing it since, I think 8 years or something now. So it's really one of those things that once you're in it, you get so addicted to it that it's such a really satisfying place to be in, to be honest.
Oh, that's really nice. And actually, I really like that intro, because there are, as there are with Rec2X, as there are with any recruiter listening, there are lots of investors and mentors and incubation companies out there. But I really like the way you sort of position that it's almost like you've got a pragmatic approach to who you would partner, that whatever they want to achieve in their goal. I love that. That's really
impressive. Yeah, it's a pretty fluid thing, but I suppose, some of the things that we'll get into today, because starting off is such a personal thing and people do it for so many different types of reasons, you can't have a stagnant kind of support structure around them. So it needs to be quite fluid, which is tough at times, but also incredibly, as cliche as that sounds, rewarding at others. Yeah,
I'm sure. And congratulations to you for, clearly you're helping to change people's lives. And I always think that, and we will definitely come on to this, that one of the key things that I found running my own business is that I feel, even though you have to work probably harder than you think you do when you run your own business, and that's definitely something I'm sure we'll touch on. You are free to make choices, and I think that's, I'd like that to be the tone that we set, that's what we're talking about. It's about creating choice and freedom for people. So yes, I think the first thing that we're going to discuss is a good way to start, because it's quite literally, what are the key pillars for somebody thinking about starting their own business, setting up on their own?
Yes, I think there's 2 areas of that, because obviously it's a question that we get all the time. I think there's the pre-launch pillars, all joking aside, and then the pragmatic pillars to physically help you do what you're looking to do. The pre-launch stuff is the slightly more holistic but incredibly important thing to get clear in your own head, which basically then focus around personally, as cliche as I know it sounds, personally, are you ready to do this? And that is defined with so many different kind of definitions for different types of people. In terms of the type of individual that we're fortunate to work with and have done over the years, I'm sure you've seen 101 over the years. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all in terms of personally people being ready. I think the only thing that sometimes stops people personally is making sure that they have other key personal landmarks in their personal life kind of either done or on the horizon, i.e. buying houses, starting a family, marriage. Those things are the things that you want to make sure that personally you're clear on, and you've got the support of those around you. And then of course there's the professional time, which obviously we waffle on about so much. I think that's one of those things that you could do a whole podcast just on that, but really that's being really, and I'm sure you find it yourself in terms of speaking to so many recruiters over the years, being really honest with yourself in terms of maybe the last 12, 18 months of your own desk, your own billings, and being confident that that's something that you can translate into your own vehicle, and kind of the realities of what that might look like as well, which is something that I know you and I will probably touch upon. So I think that's a roundabout way of saying you've got the pre-launch pillars, those personal and professional pillars, but also then when you're then laying out your stall in terms of, okay, what does this business really need to do? You're looking at the key pillars. So that's the accounts and back of the side of that business, of course, whatever that might look like. The legal and compliance areas of that business, the creative and marketing side of things being probably pillar 3. And then obviously, the note it sounds, the recruitment tools, the CRMs, the tech that our guys feel they're going to need as well. So in terms of the 4 pillars around those setups, that tends to be where we see most of our guys wanting to put their focus, especially in the early days.
Yeah, definitely. Now, and you know what? I love that you started out with personal. I think in my experience, when I've seen people successfully launch on their own, they've not always, it's not been one size fits all. I've seen single parents do it, against the odds. I've seen people do it where they're the main breadwinner and they've got so much to lose, but they've just gone for it anyway. But they've had and I'm going to say something here, I think they've had the right mindset. I think they've been mentally, this is the only thing that they can do. And I'm sure you do this as well as a pre-qualifying thing. And if you're listening to this now and there's always going to be trepidation, there's always going to be fear, there's always going to be an external narrative of people saying, don't do it. But if you are so adamant and determined that this is something you want to and should be doing, then it's definitely the right time for you to do it. And I'm pleased that you mentioned that about the desk element, because how you speak to yourself and how you need to honestly look at what you've built definitely over the last 2 years, and actually maybe even pre-COVID, how much of that is legacy relationships that you have been fortunate to work upon?
Inherited.
How much of that have you won? Because if it's the latter, you're good to go. But if it's the previous one, you are going to struggle. I
think that's pre-qualifying questions that you need to ask yourself, isn't it? Yeah. And I think that's something, funny enough, that was a kind of a topic that one of our clients articulated to me. It was years ago now, in terms of what really made them feel like it was the right time professionally, where they essentially look at that desk and saying, honestly, if I were to lift that up over the last 2-3 years and just happen to be in ABC recruitment, do I feel like I'd still be in near about the same position as I am now? And I think if you can hand on heart say that, brilliant. If you can't, it's more about just thinking, well, what steps do I need to take to get there? But I think, you're absolutely right in terms of the personal side of things. It's one of those things that, again, it has to be, as cliche as I know it sounds, an all-consuming thing. And one of those things that if you're toying between an employed role and potentially starting on your own, I would always encourage anyone to go down that employed route until it becomes a niggling thing that you just can't shake.
And until it becomes where you feel like, and I don't mean unemployable quite literally, and I'm going to speak about my own experience. My business, Key Recruitment, was set up, after a maternity break. But I was, if I hadn't had Isabel and I hadn't gone on a maternity break, I was absolutely, in that last year of my employed role, I know I was ready to set up on my own, because I was having my decisions challenged. And I knew that answering that question that's a really astute question. I knew that if I picked up my desk and put it somewhere else, I knew it was all me. I was doing all the development. It was all candidates generated through my referrals. It was fantastic being part of a business, from a social point of view. But I also knew that ultimately, maybe you might take a bit of a hit in terms of, consistent billings to start off with. And I think that's a really important thing that we should talk about, is the capital element of, I always say to people that if you're thinking of doing it, you need to be sure that for the first 3 to 6 months, you are not like beating the wolf from the door, because what you have to do is do it with no fear, really, because you're in charge of your own destiny. So I think I love the fact that we're kind of saying similar things to the market. And I think as we share this episode in 2023, we are still in a recession, or we don't know how long that's going to last. These are all external factors that could continue for years. That's the truth. And so I don't know what your sort of steer on this is, but I think actually when the economy is in the way it is, it's probably never a better time to set up on your own. It's like, take the opportunity. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think also that's then still answering that same question in terms of looking back over the last 12-18 months of your own professional desk, thinking, okay, well, that's a clear indication as to whether you can then go out and do this on your own. I think, again, a real cliche, but it is true. There's never going to be a perfect time to kind of do something for yourself anyway. So you can, and people do, you could spend hours, if not days, talking yourself into the idea and talking yourself out of it. So it's really one of those things that every single conversation you have about the idea, whether it's with friends, family, external third parties, whoever it might be, do you come off that call? Basically, spot check yourself the moment you come off that call as to what you genuinely fit. And I think it's something that you mentioned as well in terms of the professional side of things, picking up that desk and putting it over there. One of the things obviously you need to start thinking about as well is the restricted covenants that you will be under as well, and the contractual obligations there. And I think it's painting this very bleak, which I'm always I always come across hugely cynical with these things, but if you can paint a completely bleak picture of, if I were to quite rightfully respect the restrictions that I've got and not be able to negotiate anything from my previous employer based on the goodwill that I might have built up over the last 5-10 years there, do I still feel confident that those first 6-9 months are going to look how they might look for me? Because that then, as you were saying, bleeds into then the personal side of things in terms of, 4 to 6 months worth of salary, for want of a better phrase, tends to stop people putting themselves under any further pressure in what is already an incredibly pressurizing thing anyway.
Definitely, yeah. No, I totally agree. And that then cascades into a whole messy situation where you're just taking any business when that's not how you'd want to strategically build out any desk, never mind your own desk. I'm really pleased you brought up restrictive covenants, because that's obviously something that everyone will be expecting us to talk about. So, I mean, I think that, from a case study point of view, I think that it always tends to, if it's a robust covenant in an employment contract, you have to honor it. You can't sort of secretly get somebody else, ringing those clients for you. Have to, and my advice is always do the right thing, because actually if you are thinking of setting up on your own, you will naturally be a business developer, and therefore there will be ways that you can win business for the first 6 months, and then on 6 months and a day, or if it's 12 months, usually it's 6 months, then that's fair game, but there are always different situations. Like you say, I've had plenty of people that have done it, and they've come to a very, very, mutually friendly, business in, so just go for it, or maybe even refer business back to that company.
Well, 9 times out of 10 it tends to be quite an amicable thing, so that's a really positive kind of situation for most of our guys, because you go into that final meeting saying, okay, I'm making it up, but let's say you have 10 clients and that 3 or 4 of them aren't going to work with you guys unless I'm here. Let's make it amicable, let's make it good for the end client and good for you guys. And that's where you have those split fees over those first 6 months, which we see quite a lot. You then see the slightly less glamorous end of it, where that conversation doesn't go very well, they march out the door, and essentially that's even a bigger indicator to respect those restrictions, because they're going to be on you, and they're going to want to see you mess up so that they can ping you for it, so don't give them the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, I mean, look, it sounds like, if people are going to approach you as a potential incubator and investor, then you sound very realistic. And I do use the word pragmatic, and I love that word, because that's very much how I operate. But let's don't say bleak picture, but generally speaking, what do recruiters come to you and say their biggest headache is when they've set up? So what do they tend to say?
When they've set up. So usually we'll speak to these guys prior to setting up themselves. So in terms of the headaches that are maybe stopping them from doing it, it's ultimately, as cliche as this analogy is, if you were looking at a football team and being you're the best striker in that football team, naturally you want to be scoring the goals and focusing on what you do best, and you don't want to be at right back clearing another corner doing what you're doing, because it takes you away from scoring. So that's the headache that most of our guys kind of find, in terms of there's a sheer volume of things that you have to do in launching and then supporting your own thing, something that you'll know firsthand yourself. And it's about being able to try and streamline that to allow yourself to focus as much time as humanly possible on the billing side of that business. Because, and it's something that you and I, I'm sure, will kind of delve into, there's a heck of a lot that you can focus on when you start and run your own thing away from the billing side of that business. And some of it is glamorous, and some of it is great to get involved in, some of it is pure hard work and not glamorous at all, but you need to do it. But ultimately, the driving force behind any business, especially in those first 12, 18 months, is are you billing? Are you billing as much as you can to drive that business to a position where you can then start working a little bit more strategically as to what you might want to go, where you might want to take that business, sorry. So in terms of the headaches, I think the biggest one is the sheer, without catastrophizing it, because I don't want to, the sheer overwhelm of, there are so many moving parts. You want to focus on what you do best, and it's just then trying to find the right people, the right companies, the right infrastructure to support you in doing it, because it's a big old commitment, basically siphoning off any aspect of your business if you don't trust the people that are going to be supporting you in that.
Yeah, having trusted partners is a really critical part of it. I totally agree. So in your experience, and I don't know whether you do see people that try to do it themselves, but why do startups tend to fail?
A whole host of reasons, I'm sure you can imagine. I think over the years, there tend to be two reasons why these businesses tend to fail. The first one is that, and I know, again, it sounds an overly used word in this podcast already, but a cliche kind of thing, but it's because ultimately they didn't want to do it for the right reasons at the very beginning. And therefore, the moment it gets a little bit hairy and a little bit tricky, understandably, and that might be month 2, that might be month 22, they think, this isn't quite for me. This isn't giving me what I hoped it was giving me, and therefore they close it down. So it's not necessarily that it wasn't succeeding; it just wasn't giving, the vehicle wasn't giving them what they want. But I think that always then goes back to being really honest with yourself, personally and professionally, in the early days as to why you're actually doing it.
Yeah,
are you doing it for the right types of reasons, or are you doing it just because you're a bit niggled at your boss because they changed your commission structure one more time, which is frustrating. But yeah. But the second reason is kind of the one that you and I touched upon as well, which is actually they focus too intently on other things within that business as opposed to just the billing side of that business. Not to say they're not important, because of course they are, and not to say that that foundation isn't going to allow you then to springboard off and do what you're looking to do in that business. But ultimately, it's chunking the stages of the business into clear steps and thinking, okay, where does my focus really need to be? Not where do I want it to be, but where do I need it to be in those first 3?
I mean, I would say your first 6 to 12 months, 75 to 80% of your time should be spent on business development and billing, and then the other 25% should be made up of all the other elements that you can't then delegate out to, whether it's yourself or another third party, such as your marketing, such as whether it's your corporate structure, whatever it might look like. So basically a main part of your week. So 4 days out of 5, you will be spent running your desk until you.
And something that you and I spoke off air about, and obviously is a very prevalent theme as well, is the isolation piece as well. I think sometimes it's again, I'm always guilty of painting a bleak picture of these things, but there are times it's not fun at all. And it's one of those things that you need to make sure that financially this vehicle is working for you, but other things, it needs to be giving you other things as well, because otherwise sometimes just the financials isn't worth it. So I think the isolation piece is an important one, but I think as an industry, we've got a heck of a lot better over the last couple of years, even pre-COVID as well, in terms of those collaborative spaces. That means that there are always people going through the same kind of hurdles and challenges, and even if it's a half an hour conversation, just to validate the rubbish that you're going through at the moment isn't just you. It's a useful thing to do, and often undervalued as well. Does that make sense?
No, I totally agree. And I think that's one thing that was brilliantly the theme of 2020 was the collaboration, whether it's speaking to competitors, whether it's working in a shared space and just talking to someone that's also self-employed but maybe isn't in recruitment, just talking about shared experiences, because actually that is what connects human beings, and then you don't feel so isolated all of a sudden. You only need 1 or 2 people. So I'm really pleased we focused on that. So when you're potentially sort of either seeking out or you've been approached by somebody who is thinking of launching, are there key behaviors that you look for, or key sort of factors that you look for to say they're somebody that we want to work with?
No, absolutely. So we tend to base our kind of decisions around 3 metrics, and it's always been the same thing. So the first one is, as obvious as it sounds, do we genuinely understand why this individual is looking to do what they're looking to do? And not only do we know what it is, but do we get it? Can we empathize with it? Do we feel that in our client base right now, they're very similar to other motivations that other people have, because therefore they're an entity that we understand, and therefore we're the right vehicle for them. Are they doing it basically for the right reasons? Are they not just a bit niggled, Friday evening, and they just want to do anything else apart from what it might be? The second one is slightly more pragmatic, i.e., do we understand their market? Have we supported guys in their market before? Do we understand essentially the infrastructure, the tools, the hurdles, the challenges that they're going to go through? And there have been on occasion, less so now because it's slightly more established than when you start up. From our side of things, we're very fortunate to basically be pretty confident that we can facilitate anything now. And then the third one, is probably something that you find and you apply to your clients and especially your candidates as well. Are you going to get on with these guys? It's one of those things that you do end up talking to them every day, if not every couple of days, about something. So when they ring, not only do you want them to want to ring you because they trust you in terms of what you're doing, but also you want to be able to want to pick up that phone call as well. So those are the three, and they've always been consistent.
I love that. They're really sort of for me. That's how anybody should hire. So if you're listening to this podcast just out of curiosity, but you've got no intention of ever leaving a job, or you've got no intention of ever sort of setting up on your own, and you're a leader in a business, those are three amazing metrics to measure most things by. And I think likability doesn't get talked about enough. I think it's so important to have things in common people and to genuinely enjoy speaking to them. And if
you end up doing more for them as well, I mean, I hate to kind of say it, but it is true. And that's why, again, as a vetting process, whether you're hiring into your business or whether you're obviously partnering with people, which we don't hire these guys. These guys are their own agencies. They don't work for Isotope whatsoever. But, you want to feel that affinity towards them to want to do it, and vice versa, because I'm sure you felt it, and I'm sure it'd be interesting to see, in terms of the third party parties around your business at the moment. Have they always been the same?
All very different. I mean, it's a transient thing, but I've got clients that I've worked with for 20 years. I've done Rec 20 years. They've known me 20 years. I don't even have to talk to them about a candidate. I can just go, I've got someone, and they go, yeah, book them in. I'm like, no, I need to talk to you about them. And then I've got, like I'm sure you have continual conversations, recommendations, people that see what we do through personal branding and marketing. That we've been watching you for a while. Will you partner our business, or will you support me in a new role? So it's continual. And I think, that's a really important lesson, that, don't ever just rest on your laurels as a recruiter. You've always got to sort of continue to have more dialogue. But I think you then learn to understand, you can then spot, and I'm sure you can, I can spot a future partner a mile off, because it comes down to the why. And I'm not saying we have the same why, because everybody's why is very personal and very different, but we all have a firm shared value system. I think communication style is really important. I'm as blunt as they come. I try and soften it sometimes gently, but I think people know where they stand with me. I've always said I'm a bit Marmite, but it's because sometimes I have to say things that maybe people don't like to hear. Like, don't tell somebody on an interview that where you're interviewing for a new job that you're hungover. Not a great first impression.
Maybe not. No,
you don't need to tell them that it's doing. They can't smell your beer breath, don't worry. But I'll tell them that. And I think it's important to I think you tend to attract people that have the shared vibe.
You do then, don't you? Yeah. And that's where, again, that's something that candidate or that client, the same with the recruiters that we're fortunate to speak to, they should feel that affinity as well. It's certainly not a one-way thing.
No.
That's why, it's a long drawn out process. The types of conversations that you have about starting something for yourself, they take months, if not years, before it feels like the right time. So it's amazing how much you talk about in and around just the practical tools, because without being glib about it, the practical tools are the practical tools. They're there or they're not there. It's everything else that goes around that's really going to hopefully add the value that you see in these types of things.
Yeah, and authenticity is a very important thing, and I think you clearly value that as well. But although we've not talked about it specifically, I think that's really very obvious with the things that you've said, that it's about that originality and just ensuring that people know what they're getting from it. Well, it's been so insightful. Before we finish, do you have any advice for anyone who's coming off this podcast now going, this is it, I really need to go for it? What would your sort of final bit of advice be?
Take a breath, sleep on it, and then do your research and give somebody a call. I think it's it is one of those things. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you let the ball come to you. If it starts to come overwhelmingly the right thing to do, and also day-to-day things become magnified, don't they, as well? Little gripes that weren't little gripes become huge gripes, and it starts to become absolutely okay. I need to do this now, and I need to do it the right way, and how best can I do it? So give someone a call.
That advice, because reflection is so important. Always make a big life decision after a good night's sleep. That's what I always say. You have been so delightful. I knew you would be, Max. We could have talked all day, but it's been really wonderful getting to know you. And obviously we'll make sure contact information is on this podcast. And thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. No, thank you.
Thank you.